On behalf of Urban Assembly, thank you for joining us today for expanding youth opportunity through career readiness, internships, and employment. I am Rachel Arthur, Deputy Director of Career Readiness at the Urban Assembly, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Today, we are excited to be joined by a panel of experts and advocates to discuss the policy, advocacy, and the systemic landscape of education and workforce, and ensuring that young people have the opportunities needed to thrive in the 21st century. Internship, apprenticeship, and workforce development opportunities are essential to the long-term success of students. Citywide initiatives like the Summer Youth Employment Program, or SYEP, help young people develop job skills and build valuable experience in high-demand sectors like technology, social services, and healthcare. Career programs also provide students with much-needed mentorship, career guidance, and income needed to survive. Traditionally, more than 75,000 New York City youth between the ages of 14 and 24 participate annually in SYEP. Due to city budget cuts, however, the number of students allowed to participate in SYEP was drastically reduced despite virtual redesign efforts and advocacy from community-based organizations, students, school networks, and families across NYC. Many advocates believe now more than ever, we must adopt innovative approaches and expand virtual opportunities for youth employment in 2021. So we're excited that you were able to join us as we engage in this critical conversation as to how to expand and ensure opportunities for youth at this time. To kick us off, Urban Assembly CEO David Adams will share some remarks with us.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I am excited to be here on this great panel to talk about what it means to support our young people's career development. Career development opportunities are essential to the growth and development of our young people. Now more than ever, we must partner with community organizations and industry leaders to expand opportunities for young people across New York City and elsewhere. Internships and youth employment programs increase exposure to high demand sectors and provide students with much needed mentorship, career guidance, and financial support. Across the system, we must elevate career readiness and workforce development, and that is best done through internships, apprenticeships, and paid job opportunities. Now, in our 20 years of existence, the Urban Assembly has cultivated industry partnerships and workforce opportunities across our schools for students. As a model provider, a learning solutions provider, and a network of 23 career-themed DOE public schools, the Urban Assembly strives to prepare students for the post-secondary success by ensuring that they have the knowledge, skills, and social-emotional attributes necessary to have economically viable pathways in a 21st century economy. The Urban Assembly Career Readiness Team's work includes career pathway design, labor market analysis, curriculum development support, student opportunities, internship program development, partnership development support, and teacher and staff training. Through career-connected coursework, real-world projects, career pathway programs, CTE education, and internships, the Urban Assembly students learn key employability skills. We're so grateful to our partners and our allies who maintain a commitment to reimagining education by expanding opportunities for youth across New York City and beyond. These are challenging times, and we must do all that we can to ensure that our students and all students have the ability to acquire the skills, experiences, and support necessary to succeed as they move forward in their post-secondary journeys. I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today, and I want to thank your partnership and your commitment to the work of the Urban Assembly and career development. Thank you very much. Rachel, thank you. And thank you all of our panelists for participating in this conversation today. I'll turn it over back to you.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks so much. So we are truly in for a treat today. Joining me for today's conversation, we have Philip Ellison. Philip is the Manhattan Borough Advocate and Liaison to the Technology, Data, and Development Team at the Office of the NYC Public Advocate. He is also a Community Impact Fellow at the Digital Life Initiative Research Lab at Cornell Tech. Lazar Trescan is the Vice President for Policy and Impact at Here to Here, where he leads the organization's efforts to document and disseminate the lessons from its demonstration projects, produces original research for expanded work-based learning and career pathways, and leads advocacy toward the adoption of workforce policies in high schools, post-secondary programs, and among employers. Next, we have Jorge Morales, a youth advocate and junior at the University of Rochester, pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Business and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. He is a steering committee member for the Project 1424, an initiative under the student activist group Teens Take Charge that calls for universal access to the Student Youth Employment Program and for student involvement in the design and implementation. And finally, we have Stephanie Carmona, work-based learning manager at the Urban Assembly. Stephanie works with UA schools to create employer and post-secondary partnerships, implement career readiness initiatives, and secure internships for students. She also oversees the Career Peer Student Leadership Program, a program that uses high school seniors from each UA school to promote post-secondary readiness to their peers and school staff. So we're going to get started here with our panel discussion, but we welcome you all to submit questions as well. Please use the chat to send any questions that you may have for the panelists, and as time permits, we'll get to those questions towards the end of this hour. So to start, can each of you take 1 minute and share why you believe in the power of career readiness, internships, and employment programs? And how has the work that you are a part of or your organization played a role in expanding career readiness and employment opportunities for youth? So Lazar, can we start with you?
Sure, and I just want to thank everyone involved in putting this together. I'm a big fan of the Urban Assembly, and your team is amazing. Both the folks speaking today and Kevin Beckford behind the scenes, who has just done an incredible, really impeccable job of putting this together. So, and Lindsay Dixon also behind the scenes. So just really thanks to all of you. You're great partners, and just appreciate this opportunity. I joined Here to Here, which is an organization devoted to expanding work-based learning in our high schools and public universities, partly because after 12 years of the community service side, about half my work there was around school segregation. And I really became increasingly convinced that the differences between schools that were higher and lower income, or really majority Black and Brown, versus either more diverse or majority other ethnicities, when I really pushed my student researchers and other researchers who I worked with to examine the differences between those schools, one student who was actually the former policy director of Teens Take Charge, she summed up her research in one sentence, which I thought was a great way to put it, which is that in lower income schools, the high school students think their high school is there to help them graduate. And in higher income schools or mixed schools, students think their high school is there to help them graduate, help them figure out who they want to be and who they are, and then help them create a pathway to becoming that person and understanding all the options available for them. And a lot of that is done through these real world opportunities like internships, which expand people's horizons, networks, and skills. And so for me, the real equity challenge of our time is how do we just give those opportunities, which we know are part of, as the great Janice Bloom and Michelle Fine would say, the air conditioning of some of those other schools. How do we make those part of what's in the air at every school, so that every young person has the opportunity to know themselves and make a pathway to really achieve that after high school.
Thank you. Yes, Stephanie, let me turn it to you.
Awesome. I think that career readiness, internships, and employment programs are extremely essential. They provide students technical, transferable, soft skills. Also the tools and the confidence for students to advocate for themselves and to determine their own post-secondary journey beyond high school graduation. As for the Urban Assembly, we have developed professional development series, school communities, and student opportunities that focus on making sure that our schools feel prepared, but also are aware of all the different post-secondary readiness to help our students.
Jorge and then Philip.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I just really want to echo what everyone has been saying. I mean, career readiness, internships, and youth employment, they're really there to empower our most vulnerable youth. These are the groups that are often unrepresented and are least helped by the majority of our institutions. And as a whole, it's that social capital piece that at times goes missing in a lot of those underfunded schools that are predominantly Black and Latinx. So yeah, truly important work. And as an organization, Teens Take Charge has been a fierce proponent of youth employment and its great benefits. Last summer, through Saving SYEP, among other stakeholders that have also fought, and this summer looking to expand it and to get everything back.
So first, thanks for having the Public Advocate's Office and myself, and it's good to see fellow partners in this work. Um, Really, when it comes to the power of career readiness and employment for Black and Brown and lower income and immigrant and undocumented, youth, I think on a few fold here. I think one, it's the building blocks here, both yes for the resume and the culture of entering the workspace, but it's the building blocks of like the social emotional, the collaboration, the skills that will help these youth thrive and to be able to build, careers or be able to leverage their resourcefulness in a workplace, in and out of workplace. So I think those are the really key building blocks in the power of career readiness. I also think of, or we believe, paying youth, right, for their labor, letting youth to have these experiences with money is really key. And lastly, about exposure, right? And exposure is so key. I know I'm a former worked with citizen schools. I'm a former educator. There in the citizen schools model is about apprenticeships and taking folks over to different companies and workforce experiences. And like that exposure, our youth having exposure to see themselves, see what's possible, see what's out there is really powerful to place themselves and create their own futures. And so that's that piece. And I lastly would say on our organization, it's really, as Jorge just touched on, it's really being in the fight, using our office's power of the media, the public advocate, Jamani Williams, elevating the needs of the youth, the needs to push back and make sure we prioritize these things, and really being a part of listening and meeting the youth where they're at and following their lead, right? How can we be used as a tool? So those are the ways we've been with Teens Take Charge. We could talk a little bit more about that. They really will. Jorge will talk about this, but really with Teens Take Charge, they've been a close partner in that work, and we've appreciated them inviting us to the table.
Awesome. And Philip, I'm actually going to stay with you just to expand a little bit more on what you're talking about. So given your work as Manhattan Borough advocate and your own background who's deeply tied to achieving equity, can you share your thoughts on ways in which internships and youth programs expand opportunities for Black and Latinx in particular, and what the Public Advocate's Office is doing at this time to make sure that youth have access to opportunity?
Yeah, it partly ties to the Jorge's piece of the Teens Take Charge is, recognizing that we are dealing with this crisis, that there's such, last year, about 25% of summer youth applicants received a spot. It's like 100,000 plus people, or youth particularly, that were turned away. And that's unacceptable. If we're trying to build a New York and an ecosystem that is inclusive, that is taking full advantage of the potential in our city. It's our youth, it's our diverse youth, it's the youth that are coming from these Black and Brown Latinx plus communities. And so part of that was recognizing, one, being invited to the rally. Public Advocate in our office was invited to the Teen Tech Charge Expand SYEP rally, being a chance to speak, and the Public Advocate, not just to go there and speak, but as I mentioned, it's always about, as a former educator, and the Public Advocate knows as a former organizer, right? We'd argue still an organizer in government, is to listen, right? Is to be kind of, he talked about being blown away by the different issues and how we can advocate for healthcare, prison reform, school integration, and equitable resources in our schools. And so our team, Elizabeth Kennedy, our community organizer of education, has really put that at the forefront, and also being in touch with or organizations, education and workforce organizations that work with youth to make what are their needs and what is this revisioning with youth, and then to pull at the table to the mayor, to the DOE, and in the media. So it's really been that interplay that we've been trying to advocate for, internships and workforce opportunities.
Amazing, thank you. Lazar, can you shed light as to what programs in New York City or elsewhere have been successful in expanding opportunity for youth, notably in light of COVID-19?
Yeah, and I'll drop a link into the chat. Last year, while the pandemic, wreaked tons of havoc and human damage, I think we've learned a lot. We've seen things that we're not going to be able to unsee about disparities, and the opportunity to go and the requirement to go virtual last summer really has opened up some opportunities, I think, for us moving forward. This year, SYEP has been announced that it's fully funded at $132 million. In the preliminary budget, there's still work to do to make sure that happens and make sure it gets rolled out well. But the applications are going to launch from March 16th, and it looks like, from what I'm seeing now, you'll have an opportunity about selecting remote, virtual versus in person. And I think the opportunities presented last summer, and what I just dropped into the chat was around a paper we put out around the support we did in the learning community for virtual internships, is that, young people, more than anything, young people, there's a lot of talk about learning loss and disconnection, and unfortunately some of those terms are being politicized by different interest groups. But we do know that young people need, there has been an engagement issue, particularly in high schools, which have been all remote. And some of these internship opportunities really provided young people a chance to feel reconnected, because work, unlike school at some levels, really provides young people a chance to contribute. So to the extent that we can really build off that, see young people as assets that are contributing to our economic recovery and an inclusive economy moving forward, we've worked to get SYEP away from being a program that gets kids off the streets and one that builds skills. But I think the opportunity now is really, how do we bring young people into our recovery? And then moving forward, how do virtual internships, which do offer some opportunities for scale, can they be worked into the school year, even when things are able to be in person? What are opportunities? And a lot of them are discussed in that paper, to really take what we've learned and really use it, so that the future, in our recovery, we're really doing much more around equity and using work-based learning and internships as a way to do that.
Building on that, Jorge, what did reinstatement of the Summer Youth Employment Program mean for youth in acquiring career readiness skills?
Yeah, it meant a tremendous amount of things, some that have been mentioned by a couple of the speakers, right? So the reinstatement meant that youth had the opportunity to explore career interests, not just learn and participate in this, but like they were actually putting into place many of the things that they were learning. Teens Take Charge actually ran somewhat of an online work site over the summer in partnership with SYEP. And the youth that participated in our program basically were able to learn the ins and outs of advocacy. And this basically enabled them to develop their own campaigns, which were ultimately presented for feedback to the very own public advocate, Williams. So it was a tremendous learning experience in multiple facets. So those are the key components. And what ended up happening this summer is that only a few of them were really able to participate in that. And so many were turned around, right? So we really want to make sure that all of the youth that is interested in doing these kind of opportunities and internships have that opportunity.
Thank you. This question is for everyone. Last year, there was a lot of advocacy from all the groups represented on this panel around saving Summer Youth Employment Program in New York. And so, some of the panels have already shed light on this, but let's discuss SYEP. A lot of groups are calling for its expansion. And at this time, there's a difference with how people were talking about SYEP from last summer, for example, with some of the city's current candidates seeking office explicitly raising it as a platform item. So why is that? Why is SYEP especially important now? And again, this is open to everyone. Maybe I'll kick it to Stephanie first.
Awesome. Well, first of all, SYEP is just so important because it offers so many employment opportunities. The past 2 years, we have not only seen the lottery SYEP, but we also saw a really great model, the Career Ready SYEP model. This model provides not only the upperclassmen, 11th and 12th, and the students that had just graduated an opportunity to get matched to a host and do an internship, but you have the lower classmen working together with their school and the CBO selected for their school through this model, and they focus on project-based learning. I think that expanding SYEP is so important because there is a need for equity. We know that there is hunger for career readiness, but also thinking about what the students have not been able to experience the past year and a half due to COVID-19. It is important that we're exposing these students to the life skills now.
Philip, can we turn it to you? So just talking about why SYEP is coming up this year as, you know, something so critical, especially even a lot of the mayoral candidates bringing it up as a platform item.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I take a little bit of a different, a little bit of a different take with in agreement with what the panelists said. We're also thinking about in context, we're dealing with converging crisis that like the moment calls for it. Like the moment last summer was a moment where there were calls, you know, the echoes of Black Lives Matter were running through our city, and youth were participating in these streets all over the city. It was intergenerational, but the youth were demanding the respect, you know, the urgency of the times, and those aren't disconnected, right? Especially when we see a healthcare crisis that is affecting Black, Brown, and low income, et cetera, and disconnected communities. And so we see that as also that it's a response, like it's a response that we need to meet the moment, and we need to meet the moment of uplifting the youth with employment, right? And that is human dignity. That is the dignity that the youth deserve, and our times in our city deserve it. So we also see it in this lens of connecting it to that moment of the summer as well.
Yeah, and I want to elevate that point and Stephanie's point that, like, you know, SYP, again, it's gone from this, it was originally envisioned as this deficit program of getting, you know, kids off the streets. But I think, you know, to Phil's point that, you know, we've really seen, you know, young people are assets. They're not problems that we need to protect against, right? Young people are incredible assets. And I think we saw, and I dropped in the chat, you know, when young people are empowered, they can do incredible things and become leaders. And I think, you know, the reason SYP is funded in the preliminary budget is because, you know, they did not want the smoke this year. You know, they did not want to put up to have that fight with us and with the young people again. And I think 132 million is a cheap price tag for not having to, you know, to deal with these incredible young people at your door telling you and telling everyone else how you're not doing your job well. So it is really a credit to them. And, you know, I put that paper in the chat, and that paper was successful before we released it because of the work we did behind the scenes. And to their credit, the young people have learned, you know, there's advocacy that happens on the City Hall steps, and then there's advocacy that happen behind the scenes. And to Jorge's point, you know, that was a work-based learning experience for them. And that effort to build their advocacy skills connected them, engaged them. You know, Jorge now can talk to the campaign managers of any of these mayoral candidates. You know, that's his network now. And that is the power of work-based learning, really in a nutshell.
Thank you. Jorge, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of points on that. Why is it really important? Why is it especially important now? So whenever we deal with nuanced problems and tough problems, right, such as this pandemic, we need to think of nuanced and creative solutions, right? This holds pretty true throughout our history. So right now, youth employment and the number of youth that are being disconnected from either work or education are rising to levels that have not been seen before. And this means that we need to support our youth more than ever, right? This includes finding new ways in which the youth can help our city's recovery and ensuring that they are prepared for the future in order to do better. That's basically it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jorge. The whole time that you're talking, Jorge, I'm like, you're in college right now and you're just blowing my mind. So I just really appreciate you. And I feel like you are just a testament to why this is so important to, you know, give our youth these opportunities. Lazar, last year around this time, there was a lot of debate as to whether internship and career exposure programs like SYEP were even possible to implement given social distancing protocols arising from COVID-19. However, the program for the first time was all digital last year, allowing some of the city's youth the opportunity to participate. How effective was SYEP in meeting its aims last year? And what would you say to naysayers or people who say expanding programs like SYEP and internship programs are a stress to the system and aren't feasible at this time?
Well, the second part is nonsense. We believe that high school in general and college, we already know it generally should be a year-long program, right? I think high school should be 10 months of academics and then a 2-month applied period where a paid internship is part of that. Now, that doesn't mean we can't work that in the school year. But imagine if how it could transform our city to have teams of young people contributing in the summer, in diverse integrated teams that are overcoming some of the other obstacles that stand in our way in schools that we should also be reversing around segregation, and really showing people the power of young people to make a difference. The results of SYP this summer were fantastic. I'm excited for Stephanie to talk a little bit more about the programs we were able to help support at Urban Assembly, virtual programs that were super exciting. But we learned so much. I think the young people by and large had incredible experiences, and I think moving forward now it's going to allow us to do in-person, to do virtual opportunities, and from every crisis we have to learn a few things, and I think we've learned that to Jorge's point, we need to do, it's in these times we need to do more SYP, we need to do more internships, we need to put more money into young people's hands, get them feeling empowered, get them feeling engaged. And hopefully the sign that the preliminary budget is starting at this high number is a signal that our leaders are understanding that.
And yes, you brought up Stephanie's name. So Stephanie, can you share a little bit about what the Urban Assembly did this past summer when SYP funding was cut?
Absolutely. We developed an internship program called Virtual Pathways. It was a 6-week program where the UA collaborated with a company called Talent Accelerator. The Urban Assembly selected, matched, and enrolled the students, and then Talent Accelerator developed the orientation material for the mentors and the students. They selected the mentors, and then they provided the projects for the program. The students worked solo and in groups, and each week the students would present to their mentors. There was about 70 students and about 40 mentors that were on these calls. Students were able to select projects such as developing a financial budget, creating a social media audit, and marketing campaigns. They would present based on the research and the analysis they did for each project and each lesson. The first week was a little difficult because the students needed to acclimate to the timeline and, making sure that because it was so project-based, this was very different from what they were used to. But by the second week, the students were up in action, emailing mentors when they were presenting. It was just such a great thing to see. And the fact that the program had a 90 to 95% retention rate was amazing. In addition, it also helped having a school lead working with Urban Assembly and Talent Accelerator as well.
Thanks, Steph. I was a part of that process, and I just saw the students at the end lighting up, like knowing things about marketing and saying like, how can I study this in college? And their eyes were open to new possibilities. So it was really cool to see that. A lot of your organizations are calling for an expanded SYEP program, so one that is year-round or open to all youth. What could that look like, and what would it take to make that happen? And again, this is open to everyone. An SYEP program that is year-round or open to all youth, what would that look like, and what would it take to make that happen?
I can start that. Oh,
Please
go for it, Philip, please.
Go ahead, Philip.
Well, to be very, very brief, something we've been, and I just, thinking here is, we've been thinking about fellowships and internships, and that, well, in the context of COVID and how we're moving forward, like, for one example, that, with these food banks and with the food pantries, et cetera, and the great need around food and the food that's going to really continue, that need is going to continue for the folks that have been hit hard, marginalized communities, disconnected communities, is that, you know, there's a way for CUNY to step up. And it's, you know, there have been young people who have been helping feed their neighbors throughout this time, right? And so like, it just having that, you know, thinking about how do we, there are ways for small scale pilots, like government can be reactive, but we see on the ground, you know, for example, with the food bank, the city of New York, that when volunteers dried up for delivering food and so forth, like paying youth to be a part of this process, and making sure people are eating is like one example of like expanding and another area where youth can have employment and be participatory citizens that they want to and should be, right? And so I just think that's like one example we're thinking about, just the what kind of fellowships and other internships and new spaces, as Jorge, as I pass it to Jorge, as he's talked about, you know, creative solutions, or, you know, being, you know, innovative in this way. There's opportunities like that exist that we can put together.
Yeah, to quickly add on to what Philip was mentioning, it really centers around thinking about those creative solutions, right? And I want to echo one of Lazar's points and some of what Philip has been saying, right? We need to create a better connection between school education and like labor market, like your job. There has to be a purpose to the goal, right? I talked to so many high schoolers and they're like, okay, like I don't know why, like I don't know what I'm doing after. Like, I don't understand, where am I going to use this in life? Like, why am I even learning this? It's a confusing moment. And I went through that and I can really relate to that, right? So what ends up happening is at times students end up thinking, okay, well, I have to graduate and go into college. And at times that doesn't pan out very well for many, and specifically for minority students coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds. They don't graduate, end up with massive debt, things of this sort, right? So we need to make sure that it's very clear that the purpose and the goal to the overall system, and that they all play a very, very tight-knit grid, if you will, right? Another key component to it is incorporating the youth perspective in all of this. And this is what Teens Take Charge has been an extreme advocate of, making sure that the youth are part of the planning process. It can't be just adults creating what they think the youth needs, what the youth wants. At times, yeah, they might be right, but there has to be a youth perspective in order for all of this to work the way that we want it to work.
Yeah, and I think just the need for either a year-round program or a universal program, you know, that really underlines, you know, what Jorge is talking about, you know, and Stephanie talked about around career ready or school-based SYP. You know, young people are now going to college, right? But they're going to college on the terms set by other people. They're just, you know, quote unquote, going to college, which is great. We want young people to go to college, but we want to go on their terms. Unfortunately, we live in a commodified world. And right now, because of state disinvestment in public in universities, colleges are consuming young people for their tuition and fees. That's the only way they can survive these days. Tuition and fees makes up a much greater percentage of public university revenues than ever before. But the challenge is young people, and young people, especially Black and Latino people, are increasingly going to college at high rates. But the challenge is they're going to college. What we need to do is empower them with experiences in high school, like internships, where they become consumers of college rather than become consumed by college for their tuition and fees. And it's penny wise and pound foolish to say the $2,000 we spend on an internship to pay someone and support them, you know, that compared to the tens of thousands of dollars, you know, that college costs, that we lose in productivity when young people don't complete college, because the more low income you are, the more likelihood you are to go to the 2-year college that is closest to your house and major in liberal arts, because you're not consuming college with a clear plan. And to the extent that you do that, you will have the greatest rates of not completing. And not only then are you not getting a degree, but you're saddled with experiences of failure, with debt in a lot of cases. And, you know, there goes your tap and Pell. So we really need to empower young people to have the experiences where they're consuming college. They've got an idea. And that doesn't mean they have to be locked into a specific career, but they have the youth development, self-efficacy, and self-confidence to know that they can try a few things out and it's going to work out for them.
I want to go back to what Jorge said. I think that is the urban assembly dream, is to connect our schools to having a better understanding of the labor market and be able to promote, support, and implement work-based learning. When I spoke to Teens Take Charge, when we spoke about SYP, I kind of went like more of like the tactical logistics of like, what would be the ideal SYP, and things like a better structures and systems, better structure and systems to have the students being able to complete these internships. So like the application process, it shouldn't be that a student is looking at 5 different websites and being like, wait, how do I apply? Wait, what documents? That should not be the case. Host recruitment. We need to make sure that the CBOs, the community-based organizations or employers that want to participate in SYP understand that this is not just a job, they're mentoring our students that are participating in SYP so they can have a better retention rate. And also a student match. There's so many CBOs do a really great job when they're doing the SYP model to match the student to the appropriate internship, but it really helps understanding the student, doing like those interviews to make sure that they're able to complete the program. The ideal SYP to me would be that career ready SYP model, or if you're having a year round, having the fall being able to do career preparation, then in the spring doing project-based learning, and then in the summer giving the students an opportunity to do that internship. So all year round, you're having them being exposed, and I think it's extremely important to have those 3 different elements.
Thanks, Stephanie. And yes, there were just a lot of powerful visions that I saw, in all of those responses. Someone, Jorge actually highlighted in the chat, consumers of college rather than consumed by college. Thanks, Lazar, for saying that. I feel like that's going to probably be circling around social media soon. So also just want to remind you all, that you can ask questions. So you can put those in the chat. We're getting close to the end of our questions. So feel free to put those in the chat and we'll turn it over to some of the ones that you have. Philip, how can city government or governments in general prioritize career readiness and internship programs at this time? How can city budgets be constructed towards prioritizing career readiness and employment opportunities for youth?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there's different pieces here. I can give, one, it's clear the examples that, one is meeting the youth where they're at and fighting with them and amplifying their voice, amplifying their needs through different channels, back channels to the mayor's office and the Department of Education, and channels to the public, right, to raise this issue, as has been mentioned. Like that's a key function for our office, just using the example of our office and our unique Public Advocate's Office being this unique advocacy and oversight agency, so that is the one that's been mentioned. And also I think one, and I'll be one that where I'm working through and processing, right, prioritizing is that as a liaison, the tech and data liaison, in addition to my community engagement, community affairs work, is that we've launched some work around technology, looking at like technology and systemic racism, looking at surveillance, and so not only are we trying to educate the public, use storytelling of Black and Brown and marginalized communities and the impacts of technology, but there's also an element where we're talking about how do we also know, while we need to make people aware, engage the youth, and we're going to want to do a youth event where we're also prioritizing bringing some of these workforce players, these internships, partners, the CBOs, to the table to also talk about the exposure around technology and workforce skills, as well as ethics, thinking about the ethics, right, that we need to provide. So that's just an example of how we're prioritizing. We're doing both. We need to incorporate that in our work. So I use that as a hard example. And the pieces here around, constructing the budgets. I mean, it's what we know. It's been mentioned when we give youth jobs, right? Like we, as was mentioned, like the money. We're much safer, right? The money we're really saving, and given some of the things I mentioned by Lazar and so forth, it's really imperative that we have that context. And so, there's a study in Boston about safety, 50% reduction of crime by summer youth employment. And so when we do that, we need to look at NYPD and we need to reallocate these resources. We need to think about budget priorities of our city. And reallocation is really, really key. Expansion and mentoring. And it's a multi-layered. We need to tap into different funding, funding streams. And lastly, it's the funding streams, it's that budget, it's the reallocation, but it's also the partnerships, looking at CUNY partnership, looking at P-TECH and different models. Like, it's both these budgets, it's both this courage and awareness, and also these partnerships that are key.
I don't want to breeze over that. Did you say 50% reduction in Boston through summer?
Yeah.
That's incredible. So we should all be looking to that as a case study. So last question here that we have, and like I said, remember to drop some questions in the chat. Jorge, can you share why advocacy matters now? How can people who want to advocate for the expansion of SYEP get involved in efforts to do so?
Yeah, for sure. So I became involved in advocacy when I was a sophomore in high school. And ever since then, I mean, I think what drove me to it was being young and, people telling me nobody is gonna like speak up for you but yourself, right? You bring up this perspective, your experience, and that's something that nobody else has gone through. So in order you want to see change in things that you care about, you have to speak up, you have to bring that perspective into the table, and you have to fight for that seat at the table. So it shouldn't be that way. And that's what we're hoping to accomplish, right? But advocacy matters more than now is because it's done in all aspects of society, right? Big businesses are currently lobbying in Washington to try to do something, right? So why should you not stand up for yourself, right? So that's why big coalitions matter. That's why the people matter, like that saying, power to the people, like that's crucial. That's important. We should really center around that, right? And it's difficult. It's not easy, but when it comes together, it's quite beautiful. If folks are interested in expanding SYEP, I mean, really, you can start by reaching out to your council members and telling them this is an issue that's important to me, and you should care about it. You can easily probably search where their stance is on certain things. So another way of doing it is by reaching out to some of these folks that have been in the panel, including Teens Take Charge. We're always launching new campaigns, trying to find for new ways in which we can collaborate with other organizations or other youth, and just supporting. That's honestly the easiest way as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Jorge. So we're going to turn to some questions from the audience. And panelists, you're doing a great job. But as we're wrapping up in time, I'll just open this up to anyone who wants to take the question. We'll try to keep these answers brief because we do have several questions here from the audience. So Alan Hecht asked, is SYEP going forward this year? Do we know when the application will be opening? Any suggestions or ways to get students to apply to programs, and how us counselors can track if they are applying? Anyone know anything about SYEP for this year? Go ahead, Steph.
Sure. So I think our schools that know that they're going to be part of the Career Ready SYEP, I think that's up and running. I believe that Lazar put March 16th. Is it March 16th? Definitely trying to put it on your school website, promoting it as in any email that you have possible, but also like even talking about it in advisory. Maybe that's the point where you start the application process. I would also recommend our counselors to make a tracker for yourself, because you're not only having the student apply, but the documents that come with it. It's just a very lengthy process, but making sure that the students feel comfortable with you saying, hey, these are the requirements. You've worked with me and you've shown me that you have these documents, but definitely a tracker to make sure that you get as many students to apply.
Excellent. How can we ensure that providers have the capability to support universal SYEP?
Yeah, that's a huge issue, and we don't, we want to recognize that, we're not absent of we can't divorce ourselves from the history, and the history of SYEP has often been, until a few years ago, the program wasn't baseline. So Now the preliminary budget, which was released a couple of weeks ago, says that it's 70,000 slots, 132 million. So people can start planning for that. But historically, SYP has suffered from the fact that the program starts the same day as the city budget starts, which is July 1st. So unfortunately, negotiations for that budget, would also always happen to the end of June, the famous handshake at City Hall, and providers then would get slots dumped on them, at the last minute. And that's not good for young people, and it's definitely not good for providers. So they're the ones that they still bear the scars of these complicated situations. So I think they are right to be skeptical of expansion at times when there's a history of them having to sort of make magic happen in a matter of days. And so what we want to do is use the long runway we have now with a baseline program, which which began a couple of years ago, to really start building that bridge to universal. So what are the structures we need in place to get for a program that was 80,000 slots, 90,000 slots, 100,000 slots, open to every student, public high school student. Let's talk about CUNY. And we're really, through the leadership of a lot of people on this call and United Neighborhood Houses, big shout to JT Falcone, they're amazing. That we're really working with both providers and the city to build that it's great that things are baseline at this level now. We can do more, but we don't want it to fall on the backs of providers at the same time.
Excellent. Lindsay Dixon is asking if you could wave a wand and get all schools to include one aspect of career or post-secondary readiness next year as part of their curriculum, what would you choose? One aspect of career or post-secondary readiness as part of their curriculum. What would be something you would ask them to implement into their curriculum?
I would say everything when it comes to work-based learning or early college and career awareness, just saying. But I would definitely, something that our team has discussed is like the 9th grade and talking about, students' interests, but also understanding themselves when moving forward to developing their career awareness. So definitely having something in the 9th grade that we can implement in the curriculum to help our students kind of start making those decisions for themselves, start really being aware of themselves. So when they're applying to SYEP and like they're matching, they will continue to develop their life skills.
Anyone else want to add to that? Okay, I'm gonna move us along. Looks like Gina Eta asked what might be a model or a year-round program. What would that entail? Pairing experiences such as guiding students from fellowships to internships and other experiences, or just a form of extended SYEP placement?
So I'll jump in. I think the model is really what Urban Assembly is trying to do without there being a model, right? Like really embed this into every young person's year-round experience. And, this is kind of like what they do in Switzerland. It's not college or career. It's not, these things aren't running counter to each other, but teachers, students, they all see them as part of the big picture of empowering students to live the lives, live choice-filled lives. And what inspires me about Urban Assembly is that you guys all get it. We need to get other people to get it. This isn't like universal SYP. It wouldn't be an add-on. It would be a build-on to what young people are doing. And just counter, this wouldn't be pushing CBOs and intermediaries out of the picture, which we know has been a problem in our history with youth services, like pitting education against CBOs. But really, how do we empower and turbo boost schools with CBOs, with intermediary supports, with the Stephanies, Lindsays, and others of the world to really, empower them to serve their students better. So, working the power of career ready SYP, school-based SYP really brings that and hopefully empowers those CBOs too with the resources, space, and connection, year-round connection to students that will allow their out of school time work to be even stronger.
Excellent. This one's from Jalissa, and this question's for Jorge. What are we, the adults, program managers, policy people, et cetera, doing wrong? And how can we get out of the way of young people's leadership in this work? I love this question.
It's a great question. I think don't box students and don't put students in a box, right? So literally give them the freedom to think as big as they might want to. And, you know, then we can solve the puzzle, we can solve the enigma, whatever that might be, but truly let their minds wander and to things that they really want and to things they see, because they know more than many people might like to believe, right? So that's one way. Also creating a space where they feel comfortable and safe to speak up and to ask questions and all this sorts. I'm in a lot of meetings sometimes with all these folks, right? And I have some experience now, so I know how they might act. But other younger folk that are new to this kind of work are scared because they're like, okay, I don't know what this means. And I'm like, so like you should feel free to ask. Like that's totally okay. There's no there shouldn't be nothing wrong with that, right? So we're all learning as we're doing, and there should be a free and open space for that to occur.
Excellent, thank you. David Adams, our new CEO, just quoted you, let their minds wander. So yes, definitely agree with that. And don't box students in, yes. So David Berg had a question, and I think some of you have already been kind of talking about this, but if there's anything else you want to add to it, do you think there's an opportunity now to change the fundamental role of high school to more intentionally include equitable access to real world learning? Seems to me a piece to scale this great work is to have it more integrated into the high school experience. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's the dream. I mean, that's the dream, that it's not an either or, that and you know, it's complicated. You know, we have a history of social and racial hierarchies in this country that have put people on different tracks. So I get why it's complicated. It's complicated for public officials, for families. You know, that's why we need things to be universal. You know, when things are not universal, they, you know, if they're, especially when they're means tested and targeted, when they become complicated and there's not a consensus agenda. We need, you know, just like we did with pre-K, to make, you know, work-based learning universal. We know that higher income kids get it, right? Their parents are sending them to build houses for Habitat for Humanity. They're doing other types of programming. They can afford, you know, to do these unpaid internships that are apparently all the discussion on Twitter that I'm not following. But like, that is privilege. And so we need to turn that on its head and just say, no, everybody should get a paid internship. And yeah, so there are a few higher income kids that get paid internships because of it, but everybody gets empowered. I think that's okay. And yeah, and so whoever the comment was made, I think is right on. And we just need to re-envision, you know, what we're doing and how we're really seeking to empower young people. And I really think it's the equity issue of our time.
Excellent. That is all of the questions that we have. And so what I will do, panelists, no pressure, but if there was anything that you feel like you were not able to express in this, that you were, you know, still really passionate about and want to make sure that people understand about these opportunities for students, we'll give you, you know, each 30 seconds, 60 seconds to just say any closing remarks, but again, no pressure, and we'll wrap up from there. Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you to our amazing panelists. Philip, were you coming off mute to say something?
I was just to simply say to my, you know, it's been mentioned we were sitting in the context of this moment that Lazar has been putting us in the context of what the program SYEP has been and is intended, how it's shifted. And we've also talked about the pandemic and moving forward. Is that it's been clear, like in our city and in our country, we're at a moment of change. And that one, we have to empower the youth to be fundamentally parts of driving this change, listening to them. And we want to disrupt. I think it's been powerful for me, even on someone who's bringing tech and education. When you look at Kevin and so forth, that these things all come together, and that we need to disrupt the ways that, you know, public policy and or how corporations have been operating. And I think the youth are fundamentally, the youth being inside of workplaces, the youth having the skills, the advocacy tools. And so we don't want change to happen to our communities and to the youth. we need to be a part of that change and shape the co-creating our futures. And so I think that's really what some of this work is a part of.
Excellent. Thank you, Philip. So yes, audience members, we cannot see your faces, but if you will just show the panelists how much we have appreciated their time and, you know, all of their expertise that they shared with us. Panelists, thank you for your commitment to career readiness, youth employment, and expanding opportunities for young people. We hope you all enjoyed this, and also just know this session was recorded, and so it will be sent out externally very shortly. And just be sure to follow these amazing organizations and follow the Urban Assembly on social media for future events. So I am Rachel Arthur, the Deputy Director for Career Readiness at the Urban Assembly, and thank you again for joining us. Be well.